So anyone nowadays can pick up any of the crazy drone tech out there on the market and get some fairly nice looking shots. But how can you take yourself and your drone footage to the next level and really capture footage that makes people step back and say, wow? Sit tight and keep watching as I talk about how the cinematography basics of the world of film can help you achieve stunning footage with whatever caliber of drone you're flying. So please hit that like and subscribe button and let's get into this video. I classify myself as a camera guy before being a drone guy and studied film for 3 years under BAFTA-winning cinematographers and directors down at Falmouth Uni in Cornwall. I specialised in cinematography during my time there and ran a freelance film business for a year after graduating before coming to work here at EDC. I don't claim to be a professional in any sense, but I did get taught at the very least the basics of camera work. So we're going to dive right into what you'll need to know before even getting your drone up into the air. There is a lot to go through here, so if you ever want to come back to a specific section, there are bookmarks, and I'll be talking quickly as well, so feel free to slow down the video in the settings. Anyway, speaking of settings, that's what we're going to start with. They should always be the first thing to check and go through if you're looking to get the best image possible. So you are going to have to start learning to adjust the settings yourself. So if you're a bit of an auto warrior, then I'm afraid that your time has come. In the long run, this will make a huge difference on your footage, as well as understanding where things may be going wrong. So stick with me on this as I'll go through the settings and explain everything, starting with the exposure triangle. Now, this is a common way of looking at how to expose properly, and this image that I'm showing on screen gives you an idea of what each part of the triangle will do to your footage and how they work with one another. When it comes to shutter speed, a general rule is to always have twice the amount of the frame rate you're going to shoot at. So if you're shooting at 24, 25 frames per second, then you're going to want it at 1/50th. If you're in slow-mo settings where you'll want to shoot at a higher than normal frame rate, say 60 FPS, you're looking at 1/120th, and so on, etc, etc. The S in shutter speed is one of two ways of measuring in relation to the amount it opens in a second. The other way of measuring shutter speed is through angle, but we won't go through that as that's mainly for high-end cine or film cameras. As you can see, you can mess around with this for artistic purposes, as the rules are always made to be broken once you know them. The most common example of this can be seen in the opening scene of a personal favourite film of mine, Saving Private Ryan, where the shutter speed has been reduced to create motion blur and enhance the POV shots that are being deployed in order to show the chaos and make the viewer feel as though they are experiencing the brutality of war. As a final tip for shutter speed, I will suggest going for a higher shutter speed if you're a bit unsure, as the other way will result in motion blur and there is no way to remove that in post. Now, in terms of aperture, you're rarely going to be using a drone that can allow for a wide depth of field. However, it is always good to try and get as low an aperture as possible, as it does allow more light into your image and results in less shadows. Another quick tip for when adjusting aperture and exposing in general is to use the zebra lines feature in your camera settings, as this will show you where your image is overexposed or blown out. In order to avoid this and keep a low aperture on a particularly sunny and bright day, is to use these ND filters. Now this also brings us nicely along to ISO and our next topic of lighting. Keeping the ISO as low as possible is integral, as it's often grainy footage that people will notice the most before anything. And I'm going to show you on screen how ND filters can help when comparing a shot where the ISO has been bumped up and when the ISO is low and the right ND filter is on. As you can see, there is a massive difference. Okay, so lighting, and obviously as you'll be outside most of the time, the only real way you can control lighting is by shooting depending on the time of the day and where the sun is. For this, we'll stick with the ND filters and quickly talk about them and how they're essential to your drone kit. ND filters, which stands for neutral density, are basically sunglasses for the drone that allow you to darken the image to change the settings as mentioned in order to find the right exposure. Normally you'll get a set like this with 4, 8, 16 and 32, with 32 being the darkest sunglasses for the brightest of days. Hope that analogy has made sense for you. But just to help out here are 4 images where I would use each ND filter, but realistically I'm normally out filming during the day and the 16 is always my go-to as it allows me to have the lowest aperture and ISO. But this leads us on to where lighting can be integral to changing the mood and feel of your shots. Golden hour is the 2 times of the day where you have the chance to play with some light. Golden hour refers to the hour where the sun is either rising or setting, with the exact time of sunrise or sunset being kind of right in the middle of that hour period. So say we took sunrise and we filmed 30 minutes just before it was properly out, you're going to get a cold image with seeps of light that reflects a darker tone and mood. This is where I would use ND4. In my opinion, majority of the time you should have an ND filter on unless you're filming at night or an extremely low light setting, and this is just my opinion, but I'll look for any slating in the comments. Now for the 30 minutes after the sun has come up, it will begin to brighten and you'll have the low burning orange sun in the background or on your subject. And this indicates a more hopeful and sort of joyous mood and tone. For this, I would use ND8. In terms of white balance, which belongs to both settings and lighting, here is a quick chart to show you where your color balance should be depending on where you are and the type of weather on the day. White balance can be changed for artistic choice, such as making the scene intentionally cold and blue, but I think personally you're better leaving it for post-production for anything like that. So you get the idea of where the ND filters and white balance can be used and how sunrise and sunset can be your friends when telling a story through drone footage. We'll come on to storytelling later, but let's talk about getting into the air and how movement can help you with creating stunning drone shots, and not just drone shots, but setting a scene and putting shots with the right movements together. Now, movement is where filming with a drone is truly astonishing. If you were to talk about moving with a camera, you've got to think about dollies, steadicams, jibs, cranes, and the list is endless. All that set up just to achieve one shot. With the drone, you can do anything with a flick of the analog stick. You can get 5 different shots of the same scene, and all in the space of 10 minutes, if that. But at the same time, this can be the downfall with drones and their accessibility, let's say. You can lose the artistic meaning of why you've gone for a specific movement and what you're trying to show, as there are so many possibilities. So I'm just going to quickly show you some movements and how they might be useful and what you are trying to get across to the viewer. So here are some establishing shots where you present the location and possibly subject within them. Things such as slowly going in or coming from high all the way down to the setting. You can see here how I cut up this one long shot with the music and closeness of the shot constantly changing to really set the tension. Another one is slowly coming up to reveal something behind the foreground. A quick tip in that these kind of shots and drones in general always work well when something is nice and close in the foreground with your desired location in the background, and it always adds a lot of depth. As well as this, there are flying through objects and gaps, which always keeps the viewer interested and is a great way of revealing different areas of your location. Normally for ending any video, the classic is to pull away, maybe even with a slight turn towards the end. So just go out and try as many things as possible and see what they make you feel, or even the viewer, and keep them in mind for the next time you go out flying. Be experimental, but make sure to make decisive decisions with meaning behind them, as opposed to just thinking, oh, this looks good, let's try that. You always want to think about the drone's height as well and what it evokes to the viewer. A low angle can be menacing, whereas a high angle makes the subject seem small and vulnerable. Remember to think about composition and where the viewer's eyes lead, as this diagram shows. So, composition leads us on to some cinematic tips and tricks for you to consider when trying to be as creative as possible with your drone shots. There are some classic rules and cinematic staples to go through, and we'll start with the rule of thirds. This is the idea that whatever subject, be it a person or a building, you want to have roughly the center of these vertical lines on either side of the screen. In your camera settings for your drone, you can find the rule of third guidelines, which I always go with, as well as a central marker for anything I want to be symmetrical. If you want to go all Wes Anderson with your filming, a personal favorite director of mine.
Number 1, the bank want a drug screen for everyone on the crew before they forward the money.
A piss test?
Yes, a piss test.
As well as the rule of thirds, you have guiding lines, or also known as leading lines, that help to guide your viewer or the subject or something you want them to specifically see. This always makes for an interesting shot. These can vary, so always try to look out for them. Similar to leading lines, you've got geometric dynamics, and we're going to quickly return to Saving Private Ryan and show some screenshots and how they reveal geometric dynamics and how they show imbalanced triangles, diagonal lines, and complex elements. This can easily be shown through landscape drone filming as well as, so really try and push the boundaries of your shots and consider this when out in the world. Then of course you've got things such as Dutch angles, where they're there to make the viewer feel distressed or showing the character feel uneasy, and this can be done in post by zooming in your image and just rotating it to how much you feel. Lastly, you also have looking space, and although this is normally for a close-up of a character to show both positive looking space and negative for short-sighted composition, it can be done with the drone by showing where the shots may be taking you, or you choose to keep it very close in without revealing too much of the landscape. Using a subject and telling a story. Okay, now this is the final one, so stay with me on this crash course on the world of cinematography and incorporating it into flying your drone. Now this part is all about using a subject and telling a story. Anyone can stick a drone up into the air and capture beautiful landscapes on a sunny day, and that's why we love flying drones. But if you really want to keep a viewer watching, there needs to be something on screen to hook their attention. Whether this be someone walking, cycling, a herd of animals, or even a bird if you become skilled enough with a drone without disrupting it, of course. This is what will keep the viewer hooked, and this ties into telling a story with whatever you may be filming. Audiences want to follow something and find out where it's going, and it's your job to show that. Using everything I've talked about, you are set with all the storytelling tools you need, as it's the ability to tell a story with whatever you are filming that will capture a viewer. Now just remember, anyone can pick up a drone and learn to fly and have all these settings down to a T, but it's you that's going to make an impact and have a different artistic choice and vision to anyone else. So head out there guys, get flying and get those creative juices flowing, and if you have taken anything from this video, then please give it a like, subscribe to our channel so we can continue to bring exciting and informative content that you guys hopefully love. And until next time, I'll see you next time. Damn, that was one take.